He's a complete pathological liar.
Let's be honest. There are outsiders coming into communities, stealing and moving jobs away, and making life harder for people living there. And they have names: Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square. Lied about being a head coach of a football team.
Because this started, and I love this story, as a young prosecutor. Kamala Harris talked about going in that courtroom for the first time.
Pathological liars. People that are habitual liars. They just lie all the time about everything. Yeah. Oh, you didn't deploy for war. You didn't. Why are you saying you deployed at war? The weapons you used in war? No. You were in war.
I plan on waking up on November 6th with Madam President.
I want to be clear, you won't be waking up together.
No, you weren't a head coach. You were the water boy. What the f*** are you talking about?
I thought some of that was weird.
It's just a lie.
Walz says Democrats hate success.
We as Democrats, we want people to pay their fair share, but why are we against people being successful like that? We can't be. Why are we against? We should talk about businesses. Not all businesses exploit their workers, and we get ourselves stuck in that.
Oh, well,
and
Governor,
I think we lose them.
Get a room. Oh, wait, they weren't in a room. Vince.
This is the guy that was rooting against Tesla stock.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the same guy.
Yo, it's amazing.
On air, something crazy just happened and no one was prepared. Joe Rogan gave to Blinks. Greg Gutfeld almost spat out his libation. Additionally, Tim Walz is most likely still attempting to reboot. There was no argument here. A demolition was in place. What did Walz say that set them off simultaneously? Also, why is the internet crashing? Fasten your seatbelt. This political carnival has now devolved into a full-fledged roasting.
Tim Walz is out there talking again.
Did he say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they were threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. So he said, like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools.
That was the...
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal.
What do you get when Greg Gutfeld and Joe Rogan enter? A discussion about political gaslighting, mandates, and lockdowns? The governor is apparently running faster than his press secretary can spin. It starts out slowly. Rogan's eyebrows go up. Gutfeld tilts his head. In Minnesota, Tim Walz's employees are searching for ways to vanish from the internet as a group. This was not merely a criticism. A two-man comedic horror show was what it was. The highlight of the show was a man who was able to make leadership into a flip-flopping competition on an Olympic scale.
Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there!" and then ran away.
Ever seen that? No. The video of him taking down the Minnesota flag and he replaced it with the new flag that looks a lot like the Somali flag. Minnesota has a huge population of Somalis in it. Oh, wait a minute. So he gets the flag, picks it up, moves it out of the way, and replaces it. Look at this.
There, that's better.
Why is that better?
I don't know.
Let's start by discussing the legendary Tim Walz. His pandemic plan is as chaotic as the governor's resume. He was once a mild-mannered high school teacher who became a political hopeful. He made data-driven decisions, smiled, and exuded Midwestern charm as he walked into office. However, that spreadsheet caught fire very quickly. He followed the science for a moment. Then, like a jazz player on 3 espressos and little sleep, he was swaying public policy.
I like it, like, what a better way to show their opposition to successful people than making him VP. He's the best example of failing up.
Yeah, and he didn't even do good at failing up because he helped tank the ticket and she lost the race because it showed, like, Tim Walz is the best example for why Kamala Harris has the worst political instincts in the Democrat Party, which is, I mean, it's a low bar, but...
He seemed like your amiable, affable neighbor before the mayhem, the type that waves while watering his grass excessively. But after it started, it seemed Like he followed all the rules, pulse them in a blender until they are pureed, close the corner cafes, lock down the gyms, and close the churches. Mass protests are perfectly acceptable, though. Apparently, when a political message is involved, viruses take a pause.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, welcome to the Capitol. It's great that you're all. Sir, you're welcome to come. Let me finish. Let me finish and vote.
Hey, sir, he doesn't have fucking votes. Shut your mouth.
This man was a PowerPoint-wielding Thanos with emergency powers. He grabbed another executive order as if he were amassing infinity stones whenever someone inquired about when it would stop. Additionally, the mask mandates were a trilogy unto themselves. Mask on, mask off, mask optional, mask necessary. Inside, unless you're wearing Crocs, standing motionless, and singing softly. Instead of making rules, he made riddles. This is where Joe Rogan entered the picture. Observing from a distance, like a man who had just smelled something foul in the refrigerator. Neither government overreach nor power-hungry politicians who act as though they are the only ones with Google are particularly appealing to Joe. Why did liquor stores seem to be immune to the yellow tape that was applied to playgrounds? Rogan's deconstruction of the reasoning was like watching a grizzly carefully peel a banana before slamming it.
100% right with Tim Walz.
I know I'm doing something right when the Fox News crowd is all bitching at me like crazy. Like, I'm loving it.
That guy was almost the vice president of the United States.
Elon Musk was crying last week. Tim is being mean to me, you know, like, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
He may or may not have cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb.
Yeah, Biden, I think I was saying that I need a vice president.
And just when Walz was about to lose hope, Greg Gutfeld shows up drinking a Red Bull and sarcasm cocktail Gutfeld takes. The contradictions that Rogan highlights covers them up with clown makeup and puts them in the spotlight. Political consultants were so surgical in their ridicule that you could hear them sobbing quietly in the background. Instead of portraying himself as a crisis manager, Gutfeld painted Walz as a man who heard a smoke alarm and attempted to use confetti to extinguish the fire. He chuckled at the capricious regulations, such as the one that forbade indoor dining, yet permitted outside dining with windows. His haircut altered less frequently than the guidelines. At a press conference on Wednesday afternoon, businesses were instructed to wait patiently before being taken by surprise with new regulations. That sounded like they were drafted by a magic 8-ball and a bewildered intern.
Politico writes this piece on the body language from the debate, claiming that it speaks volumes. Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes.
Rogan had no choice. He emphasized how the working class was most affected. Workers who don't operate from a Zoom cube include personal trainers, mechanics, and barbers. His circle's walls, meanwhile, continued to be perfectly lit, unquestioned, and undisturbed on each virtual call. And let's not even discuss the catastrophe that is distance learning. When Rogan said that children were sent to digital purgatory while politicians' children seemed to be able to get away with attending private schools, he practically roared. Gutfeld made a comedic sketch out of it, acting as though Walz had a wheel of fortune behind the scenes. He put on a mask, blamed the feds, and pretended that everything was fine. And he tried it every morning while drinking kombucha. It was no crazy conspiracy theory. Every time, Walz's own album played on repeat, sounding more insane. Gutfeld reminded viewers of the post-George Floyd rioting, which resulted in businesses burning and cities spiraling, in case anyone believed it was just nonsense.
Even bring him up, he has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early.
Instead of taking charge, Walz spent more time trying to figure out who was in charge. It was similar to playing hide-and-seek while being held accountable. Rogan delivered the data, including economic consequences, property damage, and criminal statistics. The jokes were brought by Gutfeld. They worked together to transform a policy disaster into an irresistible roast. According to Gutfeld, it was government cosplay in which Walz pretended to be a leader but appeared to be a substitute teacher who had forgotten the lesson plan. Even worse, the cost was borne by the populace. He became, instead, the warning story that Gutfeld satirizes and Rogan laughs about. Additionally, you might want to update your CV or at the very least read your own executive orders before signing the next one when your pandemic policy becomes the subject of a UFC commentator and a late-night libertarian with a whiteboard.
Greeting the man of the hour, Tim Walz brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it, they shake, he pulls her close, and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh yeah, weird.
Joe Rogan then made his official entrance into the ring. With a pair of headphones and enough annoyance to power the Texas grid, but without a suit or a script. You could sense the sigh before he even spoke, since Joe Rogan was observing the entire spectacle in real time. Tim Walz was occupied with creating a fresh taste of hesitation. Additionally, his BS radar was pinging like a junkyard metal detector. In addition to calling attention to the hypocrisy, Rogan practically shouted it into a megaphone. While mom and pop shops were closed up, fined, or buried beneath red tape, big box titans walked through lockdowns like VIPs at a pandemic gala. It was not a scientific endeavor, it was unfair. The rules varied based on who could pay lobbyists, making it a rigged game.
Scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures.
I think we need to push back on this.
Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
He meant you, because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago, it's on the front page of the New York Times.
With the kind of common logic that had listeners asking, wait, yeah, what the hell was that all about? Greg broke it down in his podcast. Like a roast chicken, he dissected performative politics in one episode. Practicality rarely followed what was good on camera. Walz's policies, such as Minnesota's announcement of capacity constraints that appeared less logical the more you considered them, became the standard. Case study: you couldn't sit at the bar of a restaurant. You could eat indoors, but not after 10 p.m., as that's when the virus seems to get agitated. Rogan's remarks about class warfare were not nuanced. It was a complete mic drop. Anger was genuine. His imitation of the ridiculousness was akin to a stand-up comedian trapped in a soap opera. It is secure, no. Hold on. It is risky. Actually, we revised the science 5 minutes ago because we were so alarmed by a tweet. You were unsure of whether to scream or laugh. Joe made certain you completed both.
It's amazing how they operate one way when they're running, and then when they lose and get humiliated, all of a sudden they have these solutions, and they're all the things they're telling you to do. Like, why are you trying to trash one of the most successful companies in the world, you moron?
And they never did that because they all used to love Trump when Trump was giving them money.
Yeah.
Then Trump became like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack.
Yeah.
He crashed their party, showed up at the White House, and he was just like, hey, you know what? We should put like a casino over there, an MMA ring over there.
With a flamethrower and a sly smile, Gutfeld jumped in just as Walz's approval rating plummeted. If Rogan was the inquisitive commoner, Gutfeld was the cranky uncle who used charts and sarcasm to ruin Thanksgiving. He destroyed, not debated, in addition to being the focus. Walz was also the joke. Jokingly, Walz treated his emergency power preoccupation like a font decision lopped on Times New Roman. Well, Gutfeld hammered it home. This was lousy theater, the kind you leave not leadership. Furthermore, Gutfeld revised the entire screenplay, rather than merely making fun of it, which led to a complete collapse of the press team.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada, that shows some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a clue. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems?
This was followed by a more general criticism. Walz was cosplaying as a leader, not actually leading, a panic suit-clad bureaucrat from the blue states. With just one sniffle, Fauci shut down Minnesota as if it were the end of the world. Total overreaction, no balance, Gutfeld's line of elimination? Because conservatives believe Walz is crazy, and liberals believe he is weak, Walz lost the faith of both parties. That is failure rather than leadership. Walz muttered another essential update. Rogan squinted like someone teaching crypto to a toaster, and Gutfeld added, "Makes sense. If you've been sniffing sanitizer and licking chalk." Then came the side-by-sides. It was unclear to the internet whether it should mail him leadership for dummies, laugh, or cry.
Whose expertise does he rely upon for his Midwestern takes? Here's Minnesota State Rep Leigh Finke, who wants to train more children's doctors on sex change surgery and puberty blockers. He sponsored the Trans Refuge Bill, which Walz signed, which makes Minnesota a sanctuary state for such butchery.
If you promise trans refuge, then we need to increase the number of people who are offering gender-affirming care. So we have some money, hopefully we can pass, to help entice people to move from those states who also practice gender-affirming care. We want to do internship programs and fellowship programs with Children's Minnesota and other places where people can learn gender-affirming care.
Wow. It's now available for babysitting.
The devastation was surgical, not loud. This is a dissection, not merely a roast. All inconsistencies were revealed, and all ridiculous rules were ridiculed. A governor who had been left in the wreckage questioned why no one was applauding anymore. But the public's declining trust was more important than Tim Walz. Individuals notice when leaders pretend to be in charge and blame the consequences on others they neglected. The economy of Minnesota declined, little companies disappeared, the approval ratings plummeted, even devoted voters started to wonder, we signed up for this? The other governors came to terms with their errors. Walz showed no patience. Never one for subtlety, Rogan put the finishing touch on it, the kind of clarity, comedy, and truths that only emerge when the mist of performative leadership lifts not with hate,